Edwin here at Garageband and Beyond. I hope you're having a wonderful day out there. So today what I'm talking about is automation versus editing. A lot of times when I get projects from you guys out there that I mix for, I see a very common problem, which is I see you guys using the automation function for purposes that it's not really intended for, and just in a manner that's just going to make your lives much more difficult than it really needs to be in this stage of the process, right? So what we're looking at today is a project, and this is the before, and I'm going to show you the after. But if we come up here and let's just start looking at some of these automation points. Now, what this guy was doing was using the automation to remove sections, right? So like here, obviously here's another one. Here's a place where he was using it to bring it back in, and below take it back out, right? So all these automation points were put in on this line. And it was the very first thing that I removed once I started working on it. The big disadvantage of having so many different automation points is that, you know, if you need to change like the overall volume of the whole track somewhere on later down the stage after you've made all these automation moves, you have to move all of those points above, zero. So it just becomes very time consuming. And, a lot of times what I've also seen is people starting to use the compressor as a volume booster in a way that it shouldn't be used, right? When you start using your compressor to do those kinds of things, you're working the compressor in a different manner and it's going to change your tone. So just be aware of that stuff. That's not how you want to use automation. You really want to edit these things down. So instead of, going to zero or going down to the ground here with the automation tool, just cut it out and delete it, right? And if you don't know what you're going to do, you come in here, you choose what you want to cut, you select it, it's Command T, and it'll cut it into two sections, and then you can delete it as you want, okay? But anyway, so that's how you do that. Now let's just take a look at the after, and we will talk about that more. Okay, so you should be able to see an immediate difference, right? The first thing I did was really remove the majority, all of it. I removed all of the automation points, and then instead of, like here, instead of zipping it all the way down, I just cut it out, right? It just makes life so much easier, and that's why I do it. Now, you should be also noticing all the different moves that are in here. So what I'm going to talk about today is really what we would call a vocal ride. And in a sense, I should probably make a whole video on a vocal ride. But anyway, so what you do in the very, very final stages of the mixing is when you should start adding automation, unless it's like an effect or something, but volume automation for like the lead voice is what I'm talking about specifically here, but obviously any instrument will work here. But at the very final stage, so you've got everything sounding pretty good, sitting in the mix just the way you want it, and the compressors are all set, effects are all there, but you've hit points where you're like, I wish I had a little more volume here, or I wish I had a little less here. That's where you start adding the automation. So let's take a closer look at what I've done here. So if you come in and let's go down to here, for example. Now this little section right here, this is just where there was a moment in the vocal take that the voice was a lot louder than it needed to be. So all I did was simply bring it down a little bit. And again, this is at the very final stage of mixing. Now the other things you can see is like here, over here, there's a slight rise into this other section right here, right? So if you had sat here and listened to the song, you'd understand this is a lower volume section of the entire song. It's sort of like a bridge. There's less instruments happening at this point. So it's a lower volume thing. So I had to bring it down. But as I started coming out of this section into the next, which is a lot louder, what you can see is I did actually start bringing the volume up very slowly, very slightly. And what that does is help your vocal performance be a little bit more dynamic, and it'll help the transition into a louder section just seem a little bit more natural and less computerized. You know what I mean? A very simple vocal ride is, the most professional way to do this, right? Just little moves, things to add and take away, just to give the overall performance, especially in a vocal, a flow that feels natural and dynamic, right? You don't want it to just be, I mean, if the song's calling for it and you want it all straight across the board, that's fine. But in a song like this, where there are sections going up and down and all that, you want the performance to be dynamic. And so you can use the automation feature to make it more present and more powerful. But also, if you go through here, you can see a lot of that automation has been removed. And that's the biggest thing I wanted to point out is less automation, more editing is going to make your lives easier. Now, the other last thing I would add here, people are going to add about or talk about fade ins and fade outs. But if you're editing properly and you're catching the edit points, let's look at it in the editor itself here. So let's say we're here, right? So like if I was in this section here, and as you can see, let's see. Yeah, see, okay, so where I like to cut is in places like this, right? Where there's no signal or very, very little signal happening. Here would be another good point, right? So if you edit in a manner where you don't cut right on top of like a piece of a word or a piece of a guitar strum or whatever it is, if you try to pick moments that are between these waveforms that you see here, if you select here, you won't have to deal with fade ins and fade outs. That's the whole point of what I'm saying. Just edit in points where there's nothing happening, and you really shouldn't have to deal with fade in and fade outs. I think that's it. I think that's pretty much all I want to talk about. So yeah, just use the editor a lot more than automation, and you will thank me later for it. Okay. So if you have any questions, any comments, please leave them below. And I love it when you guys hit that subscribe button and share my videos, please. I really appreciate that. And hope you guys are just having a great weekend, a great springtime, and I will talk to you soon. Later.